Assalamualaikum and good morning everyone. So today we are going to discuss about the class 1 and class 2 MHC molecule as well as the self and non-self concept and the SLE. Okay, so class 1 MHC molecules, they are one of the two primary classes of the major histocompatibility complex molecule. So all this while I've been talking about this MHC. Again, let me refresh that. The MHC are defined as major histocompatibility complex. Okay, and there are two types of MHC, right? They are the class 1 and class 2 MHC, and these class 1 MHC are found only on the cell surface of all nucleated cells in your body. Okay, while the class 2 MHC proteins or complex molecules are found only on antigen presenting cells, the APC, right? And by now you should know there are three APCs here. There are three cells that can behave like an APC. They are the macrophage, dendritic cells, and the B cells. Now, class 1 MHC molecule function, all right, as you can see in this diagram here, okay, is to display these antigen fragments or peptide fragments of non-self proteins, right, or antigen from within the cell to the cytotoxic T cells. Now, while the class 2 MHC molecule function is to display, okay, the peptide fragments of non-self proteins or antigen from the outside of the cell to the helper T cell. Can you see how different they are? Class 1 MHC ni dia mesti display tu antigen fragment. Okay, bila dia display antigen fragment ini, class 1 MHC ini akan membentuk class 1 MHC antigen complex, right, dengan cytotoxic T cell. Begitu juga dengan class 2 MHC molecule. Alright, so class 1 MHC molecule, right, tujuan dia untuk present antigen fragment tu kepada cytotoxic T cell. Class 2 MHC molecule function dia untuk display antigen fragment tu kepada helper T cell. Sangat berbeza dua ni. Okay, now class endogenous antigens, meaning to say antigen fragment that is from inside the cell itself. You know that your body cells can be infected with virus, for example, this intracellular pathogen. This intracellular pathogen, once they infected your body cells, what happens? All right, the lysosomes from inside your body cell, okay, will digest those antigens into smaller fragments, right? The smaller fragments of that antigen, they are known as the antigen fragment. And this antigen fragment, as you can see in this diagram here, okay, will combine or bind with this class 1 MHC molecule from the cell, from inside the cell itself. Okay, class 1 MHC ini memang ada dalam sel badan kita, memang ada. Okay, dalam kita punya APC pula, mereka tidak class 1 MHC molecule, tetapi mereka ada class 2 MHC molecule, memang ada dalam sel. So this antigen fragment bind with the class 1 MHC, they will form the antigen class 1 MHC complex, right? Let me rephrase that, antigen class 1 MHC complex. Dan antigen yang kena display, right, di permukaan body cell ini, right, dia dalam bentuk antigen class 1 MHC complex. So this is the antigen class 1 MHC complex, which comprise of the class 1 MHC molecule and the antigen fragment, right? Now, for the class 2 MHC molecule, all right, this class 2 MHC molecule will display the antigen that is from outside the body, which we refer as exogenous antigens, because the antigens came from the outside, not from within the cell. Meaning to say, as you can see from here, all right, this APC engulf this pathogen, all right, and this pathogen also known as the extracellular pathogen. Okay, it is being engulfed. So since the antigen came from the outside, not from within the cell itself, right? So this is an exogenous antigen or exogenous pathway. Okay, so MHC, so class 2 MHC molecule dalam sel APC ini akan bind dengan antigen fragment. Right? If you're wondering where does this antigen fragment came from, well, when this APC engulf this extracellular pathogen, the lysosomes from inside the APC will secrete enzymes to digest, okay, to digest the antigen, right, from the extracellular pathogen. So those antigens, when they are already digested, they become antigen fragments, right? Those antigen fragments will bind or combine with the class 2 MHC to form antigen class 2 MHC complex. Okay, now the display of these peptide fragments on the surface of these infected cells, as well as the APC, will trigger an immediate response from the immune system, all right, where the cytotoxic T cells will respond to peptides, right? Peptides or antigen fragment bound to the class 1 MHC proteins or molecules, while the helper T cells will respond to the to the peptides or antigen fragment that bound or display, okay, by the class 2 MHC proteins or complex. Okay, class 1 MHC molecules present peptides derived from cytosolic proteins. Okay, so the pathway of the class 1 MHC presentation is called cytosolic or endogenous pathway, while class 2 MHC presentation is an exogenous pathway, right? Okay, this is like what I mentioned earlier, because the peptides or the antigen came from inside the cells for the class 1 MHC presentation or class 1 MHC complex. Now, the self and non-self concept. Now, self antigens. Self means badan kita sendiri, right? So self antigen means antigen daripada badan kita sendiri. Alright, so self antigens are marker molecules on the surface of individual cells in a multicellular organism, such as mammals, which indicate that cell to be a part of the organism. So meaning to say, alright, dalam sel badan kita ni, alright, di permukaan semua sel badan kita ada self antigens. Okay, dan self antigens tu dia berperanan sebagai marker indicator. Itu ialah sel badan kita, supaya kita punya immune system tidak pergi serang badan kita. Okay, but what happens in certain autoimmune disease, it is the other way around. Di mana kita punya immune system dia fail to recognize our self antigens. So what happens? Our immune system attacks our own body cell. So that is where or when the nightmare begins. Now, non-self antigens are markers on cells and tissues which may have entered the organism. Example, transplant, right, or organ transplants, virus, bacteria, in which the body's immune system recognizes as foreign, and as a result will initiate an immune response. Okay, now tissue transplant, talking about transplant or tissue transplant, all right? Tissue transplant is a process of moving cells, tissues or organs from one site to another, either within the same person or between a donor and a recipient, okay, or between different species. But for your level and as a general definition, tissue transplant is defined as a process of moving cells, tissues or organs from one site to another, either within the same person or between a donor and a recipient. Right now, a tissue graft between two individuals who are genetically identical, like between twins, for example, right? Between twins. So that is known as isograft, right? So what is isograft? It's a tissue graft between two individuals who are genetically identical. So twins lah. Iso means sama, all right? Iso, similar. Now, autograft means a tissue graft from one part of the body to another in the same individual. Contohnya macam, alright, kalau kaki kamu tu ada kecederaan yang teruk, alright, where there is huge area where the skin is being removed. So a partial of skin, maybe from your butt, will be sliced off and paste or put, okay, on your leg to replace the removed skin earlier from accident. Okay, so this autograft, alright, contohnya daripada trunk pergi tangan, daripada butt pergi tangan, ataupun butt pergi kaki, kulit tu dipindahkan. Now, allograft, alright, allograft is a tissue graft from a donor of the same species, right, as the recipient, but not genetically identical, right? Contohnya, between Mr. Smith to Mr. Jones, antara dua orang yang berbeza, tetapi masih dalam spesies yang sama, itu ialah allograft. Okay, contohnya macam Legion cedera kaki dia. Okay, so Shivain punya kulit kena ambil tampal di kaki Legion, macam itulah, right? Now we have xenograft, alright, it's a tissue graft between members of different species, contohnya from pig to human, right, or from monkey to human. Now, graft rejection, okay, it is an immune response directed against a transplanted tissue or organ. Okay, so now the mechanism of graft rejection. So what happens, all right, during graft rejection? In a tissue or organ transplant, the class I MHC of donor must be compatible with the class I MHC of the recipient. Incompatible of the class I MHC will result in graft rejection. Okay, so the helper T cells and cytotoxic T cells will recognize the class I MHC from the donor as foreign antigens, because it doesn't belong to the donor. So the helper T cells will secrete cytokines to activate cytotoxic T cells, right, to attack and destroy the transplanted tissue or organ via the cell-mediated immunity. So the plasma cells from the humoral immunity, again, will produce antibodies to destroy the rejected tissues also. Remember, when the helper T cells are activated, the cytokines or interleukin 2 from the cytotoxic, when the helper T cells are activated, you know that this helper T cell will secrete interleukin 2. This interleukin 2 from the helper T cells may activate or stimulates the activation of the cytotoxic T cells as well as the B cell, right? So if B cells are being activated, how B cells will proliferate and differentiate into plasma cells and memory B cells. So the plasma cells will secrete antibodies. So those antibodies will destroy the rejected tissues also. Now, to minimize this graft rejection, what happens is tissue compatibility tests is being carried, right, to ensure the matching of class I MHC between the donor and the recipient as close as possible. Okay, other than that, the usage of anti-rejection drugs, or also famously known as immunosuppressants, such as cyclosporine, okay, to suppress the immune system. So the cyclosporine, alright, will prevent the T cell from producing cytokines. Betul kan? Sebab dia suppress the immune system. Tapi there is a catch, there is a caveat for this. The patient will be vulnerable to pneumonia and other infections because your immune system is already being shut down, right? Bukan shut down, tapi dia dilemahkan, disuppress, right? So when your T cells are unable to produce cytokines, when they are any other pathogens that enters your body, your helper T cells tidak bolehlah secrete cytokines because dia telah disuppress kan, right? Dihalang untuk mengsekretkan cytokines ni. Inilah kelemahan immunosuppressants. Right? Okay, now the usage of artificial organs that has high compatibility of class 1 MHC. Or I think class better you change in the note. Usage of artificial organs that has higher compatibility of class 1 MHC. Right? Higher. And then, okay, the fourth method that can minimize graft rejection is, okay, the fact that the body has immunologically privileged locations where foreign tissue is accepted. Meaning to say, dalam badan kita ni ada certain area di mana foreign tissue ni badan kita boleh terima, right? Dia pun tidak compatible. So this enable the highly successful transplant of cornea. Contohnya di cornea tu. Alright, cornea, because the cornea has almost no associated blood or lymphatic vessel, thus unreachable by most lymphocytes. So that's why I'm sure you have heard of cornea transplant before, right? Kenapa tiada rejection? Why case of rejection is very low in cornea transplant? Because cornea tu kawasan di mana unreachable by most of our lymphocytes, right? So rejection tu memang very low. Unless certain cases, certain individual, dorang punya cornea tu, okay, lymphocyte mereka somehow boleh sampai di sana. Yang tu memang ada rejection lah. Kalau tidak compatible itu class 1 MHC molecule. Now, autoimmune disease or immunity, okay, is a disease which the body produces antibodies against its own cells or tissues. So divided into localized, okay, or organ-specific autoimmune disorder and systemic autoimmune disorder. Now, let's go with the localized specific autoimmune disorder first. So, here a particular organ is being affected. A particular organ, okay. One example is thyroiditis, which is attacks on the thyroid, where your immune system attacks your thyroid. Okay, and another example is multiple sclerosis, where your immune system attacks your myelin sheath. Bahaya kan? Okay. Okay, now another type of autoimmune disease, right, is the systemic autoimmune disorder. Right. Now, examples of systemic autoimmune, all right, disorders are the rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, and SLE. SLE is the systemic lupus erythematosus or lupus. I'm sure you heard of SLE before, okay? And this autoimmune disease can be inherited. Meaning to say, if you have this, you may, right, pass on your autoimmune disease to your offspring, to your children. Okay. So this systemic autoimmune disorder affects many organs in the body. Many organs, not one, but many. Right now, for example, in SLE, because for STPM candidates, apparently in your syllabus SLE is being mentioned, right, where you must know, about it, okay, compared with the arthritis and psoriasis. It's not compulsory. So now in SLE, what happens? Antibodies such as the IgG, IgM, IgA will attack, all right, attacks components of DNA as well as the body cells and tissues, non-specific, any tissues, right, in your body, and this will result in inflammation and tissue damage. Okay, now so the symptoms of SLE. Okay, so these pictures were taken from the internet, so I don't know who it belongs to, right? So credit goes to the owner of the ones who uploaded, or the owner of this picture itself. All right, so symptoms of this SLE, all right, sensitive to sunlight, skin rashes, pain and swelling of joints, which is very similar to the arthritis, okay, and kidney dysfunction. And then sadly, SLE cannot be cured, right? And treatment depends on individual disease characteristics such as immunosuppressant drugs that control the autoimmune reactions. Okay, so that's it for today. Okay, so next lesson will be on HIV and then infectious disease, and then that's it. All right, we already towards the end of our SEM 2.